Thanks, Michelle. Sorry about that. I wanted to get that going before we forgot about it too far. So we do have some changes to the agenda. We have Commissioner Ryan coming to talk to us about his priorities and how they will connect in with the new form of government. We have him listed at 5:20, but whenever he comes, we will have him and Karen, his staff liaison, sit right here and talk with us. We also have a couple of items from the Land Use and Infrastructure Working Group, which we are hoping to have a little bit more discussion on and bring to a vote. So any other changes to the agenda that we know of?
I'm probably going to cede my time, because we have such a hefty agenda. I'll just say a couple of remarks.
Perfect. Thank you. If not, let's go ahead and move into it. So we'll call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum. Welcome. Wanted to check to see if we had any public comments submitted. I know we have a guest who is listening and I don't believe has public comment, but let me know if I'm mistaken. And then Michelle, did we receive any public comments submitted?
We did not.
With that, we'll move into approving the January meeting minutes. I hope you all had a chance to review them. Any comments or questions or corrections to the January meeting minutes? If not, I will entertain a motion from the floor to approve the minutes as submitted.
So moved.
Thank you, Casey. Any second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Chris and Alana. Any further discussion on the minutes? If not, all in favor? Any opposition? Any abstentions? Due to absence, Paul. Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you. With that, look at that, we're zipping right through here. We're already to the director's report, but Director Long indicated she's going to cede her time to Commissioner Ryan when he arrives.
I just have a couple of items that I'll just point out if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
One, as always, please refer to the monthly report that was submitted. I know there were a lot of materials in the packet and the report alone could take a week to read. But in particular, the first page where I included a Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland update, as well as some information regarding the government transition. And also just want to mention, I know that you're all probably already aware that House Bill 3515 didn't get out of committee. But I wanted to thank everyone for their support. There are no sort of imminent next steps, but if the board is interested, we're happy to provide a broader update in the context of sustainable future at an upcoming meeting. So.
Now, did it not get out of committee just because there were so many bills at this session? Or do you have a sense of why that was?
We had a sense that there was an opposition. Yeah.
Do we understand the basis of that opposition?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. I know you're tight on time,
It's all right.
but you want to do it real quick?
Real quick.
So the Special District Association of Oregon filed a letter in opposition and signed on to that letter. The Parks District from Beaverton and Tualatin Hills Parks District also signed on to that. My commentary here, theirs. I think both of those jurisdictions have like local conversations going on between their city governments, for instance, Beaverton and Tualatin Hills, about the right balance between, those that live in Beaverton, if they're getting the services that they deserve from Tualatin Hills Parks and Rec District. Covers like 50 square miles, very large district. And then Bend is a little closer to what we were thinking of actually. So you have a city parks district, same jurisdictional lines, geographic lines. And I think there's some tension between the city of Bend and the Bend Parks District about roles and responsibilities and who should collect taxes for what services. And who should be representing community. So there you go.
So how would this be a threat to them? Sorry, I need a.
Our bill as proposed by Representative Travis Nelson only applied to the city of Portland, so it didn't, but it set a new precedent, current state statute. Only counties and independent elected bodies can be the governance structure. So the fact that we were introducing the idea to state statute, like the state of Washington currently has, that local government also could be the governance body of a parks district, with if voters and some constituent groups from Bend or Beaverton or others tried to make a state law change later to the new language that we had, maybe then one day voters would change the structures that they have. So there's many steps to get to that threat. But we're introducing an idea that's like at play in those communities that some stakeholders don't like. And so you kill ideas before they can grow, Randy.
Thanks, Todd.
Question about the programmatic assessment under government transition. Is there any more information you might be able to share about that? Is this like leadership looking to decide like how all bureaus would be structured, or?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a couple things at play. Each service area, of which we're in culture and livability currently under Commissioner Dan Ryan, is looking at their service area. So the bureaus and the offices that are under that service area, and looking and doing a programmatic assessment within the service area. There will also be some programmatic assessment that's being done across service area. And actually today there was a survey that was sent out to employees and managers and supervisors to get their feedback on potential future programmatic alignment. And my understanding is that there will also be an opportunity for community to provide some feedback. So there's a lot of work that's being done. Todd and I are very active in sort of the executive leadership team, which is basically the bureau directors, that conversation around the government transition. And then we're also working within the service area, working on these programmatic assessments. So it's a lot of work that's happening simultaneously and in different sort of tranches. So, but happy to also, there's a pretty good website, external website that explains the work a little bit better than we probably could, but yeah.
And is this going to be recommendations for like whoever the person in charge is? Is that the
Yeah,
idea?
I think it's twofold. The recommendation is actually going to our current CAO, who is Michael Jordan, who's overseeing the government transition. Then he is going to make recommendations to city council. The idea is to make some decisions and some changes before 2025, so that we're handing over more efficient government structure to a new mayor and city administrator. I'll venture to guess that some of those programmatic assessments and some of the recommendations probably will not be able to be implemented. But they really are looking, they actually have a time frame for this fall for some, so that things can be included in a budget for next year, so that so if, let's say, for instance, they decide to consolidate two programs in one bureau. That's a lot of work, right? You have to do all of the human resource stuff, the procurement, budget, etc. Classifications might change. So they're looking to be able to make those decisions in advance of the transition. But there's a lot. So I imagine that a lot will happen after 2025.
Thank you for that brief update and for entertaining our questions, Director Long. Any questions on the monthly report for Director Long or for Deputy Director Lofgren?
I just have one additional question.
Yes.
So in the monthly report, it also mentions that a database has been created by the Parks IT team that includes all Bureau performance measures, including the linkages to Healthy Parks, Healthy Partner, Portland outcome statements. Is this public yet, or are there plans to make this public?
It's not public yet, but it's part of our Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland work, which we're hoping to release our first public report on that in May, and need to work with Bonnie and see if we can get on the agenda in May, if not in May, in June, to come give you a kind of overview on that. And then right now it's an access database that's, there's probably different ways we can learn like how to make it more public, but yeah. more to
Well,
come on that.
Huge kudos. I know it's probably a tremendous list of work.
Yeah, thanks.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Director Long or Deputy Director Lofgren? If not, we'll move into the working group reports. I hope you had a chance to review the Board Affairs Working Group report. Any questions for Casey? Any brief summary from Casey?
I yield my time to Commissioner.
Thank you. Corbin,
Corbin, yeah.
So the question I have kind of connects a little bit with the monthly report, and just looking at the community center page 5 of the monthly report, it said that East Portland was activated as a warming shelter during the recent cold/snow event and reached maximum capacity. And within the board engagement working group, it looks like we're starting a discussion regarding how to alleviate the pressures around parks and recreation and possibly loop in other bureaus. And I wanted to just at some point have a conversation about our jurisdiction regarding what we can talk about versus engaging other bureaus in this work.
thank you. Yeah, I think that is something that the Board Affairs Working Group is going to have to work with the director and think about how we integrate, and the commissioner, in terms of how we integrate with other bureaus outside of parks. But thank you for bringing that up. I don't see any other questions for the Board Affairs Working Group, so we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Commissioner Ryan and his staff liaison, Karen Van Chapman. And I will cede this for you so that if people want to see you, they can, because you know the room one is that.
Oh,
It's
cool.
here you go.
Some people are up there and here, right?
Correct.
All around.
Yes, yeah. So they just have to, there's eyes everywhere.
Is that just what you guys gave me this? Okay, I have all this paper in front of me and I don't know what it means. These jobs, you really go from one meeting to another with staffing and when we walked across the street. Thanks. It's good to see you. There's a couple new faces, but at least I got to meet you before you were appointed. Is this your first meeting? Yes. Yay. So it's nice to be your commissioner oversight long enough to appoint people. So that feels good. I want to say how much I'm enjoying this. I don't know how much Director Long's enjoying this, but no, I say that in tongue in cheek because I tend to think out loud, and I tend to want to dive in and be as helpful as possible, which means I kind of need to understand what's going on. And parks are so wonderful because it's where people play, and where you play is messy. And it's where you engage, and it's messy. And it's just what I love about parks. I think it reminds me of being back in the schools community where, you know, the children don't lie. This is what's going on. And you kind of experience that with parks. People are going to tell you exactly what they think, like bulls. And so I just thought it would be really great to just level set with you. And my name is Dan in this meeting, and I'm on your team. And here we are. So one thing I wanted to make clear in this meeting is I have 5 points. So I'll go through them pretty quickly. Karen, how many minutes do I have? Or no, how many minutes do I have?
We have you listed for 15.
Okay.
I gave him 10.
Be off already.
It's for Q and A.
I told you 10.
All right.
And to be fair, we're ahead of schedule already, so.
And listen, don't tell me that. Activation of our downtown parks and plazas, squares is essential for the city of Portland to come back. It's not just a priority of parks. I'm doing my best to make it a priority for the entire city council, for the entire city. Downtown is the heart, right? It's the heart of our city. And we need some heart surgery right now. And that pumps out the blood, if you will, to all of the neighborhoods. And that's where the soul is. If the heart stops pumping, we're screwed as a city. And we're in a crisis right now. And the assets we have, assets that I grew up looking at, and some of them were even established in those years of late 70s into the 80s when I was a college student in Portland. You saw those going up. And unfortunately, some of them look terrible right now. And if we're going to be a big city, which I want us to learn how to be one, then big cities have beautiful parks and plazas and squares downtown. And people congregate there that are from, working downtown business people to tourists, to families, to people who are struggling. They're all in those parks and plazas. When you go to Paris, New York, and other big cities, you see that, you feel that. It makes you know that you're in a special place. And I want Portland to be that city. It's the city I want to live in, and I hope you do too. So most of the budget priorities that I'm pushing for are related to that. From, of course, the reimagining, if you will, that was really fun, Randy, to be invited and included in that Shred Week that you put together. So it's not just O'Brien Square, but of course it's Pioneer, it's Directors Park, it's the Fountain Sequence, it's Waterfront Park. These are beautiful assets, and some of them needed quite a scrub. And more importantly, they need some real good activation. So I thank you in advance for knowing that it doesn't mean we're letting go of the very important work that's been going on and on the shoulders of so many people. I know Commissioner Fritz did some great work to get some assets out in East Portland, which were desperately needed. So it's not dismissing any of that. It's just that we have to be relevant to where we are as a city right now. And I think this is the best way for parks to show up and play its part to bring the city back and put it into a new trajectory. So I wanted to make that clear. Workforce is my other one. It's not like I can do anything about that. I'm not recruiting people directly, but I want to be a cheerleader about that campaign. So when people voted yes on this parks levy, they expect certain things, and they certainly expect those services to be delivered. And I know last year we had a few challenges, and one of them was definitely getting enough people to actually teach swimming, to be a lifeguard. So I was really thrilled. Next moment, was it on Monday? Was that yesterday? Wow. I should remember everything you said then. I saw some really good data that shows that we're well ahead of last year, so congratulations. And I just hope all of you can join me in being a cheerleader. Like, you all have friends, family, and everyone knows that teenagers need to get work experience so they'll have a better life. And so, spread the word. We need to hire people this summer. And there's nothing better than being a parkie when you're a teen, because I know a lot of people in this room were parkie when you were a teen and look where you are today. So thanks for being a part of that effort. I heard somebody mention severe weather. And I hope it wasn't because you were talking about snow later in the week. I heard that this morning. I was in denial when I listened to that. But I used my check-in with Chair Vega Peterson on this conversation. I've used check-in times with the mayor recently on this, because if there is a couple times during the year, I always thought it might be April, maybe it's May now, where you're probably in between severe weather. We need to seize that off-season moment to really talk about a better relationship with the county on how we work together. And we don't need to be a doormat. And so when they come in to use our assets, we are open and willing to participate, but we need a more respectful relationship so that our assets are not damaged and that our employees aren't traumatized And if they are, then that there's support for what happened. And there's a willingness to get more security. There's a willingness to have more assistance with preparation and takedown. So I feel like what I've listened to over time is that Parks has been used in a way. It's a relationship that needs mending. And it's a relationship that needs some attention. And so I just want you to know, I'm advocating hard on that one. And Commissioner Gonzalez is fully on board with that as well. And I know Commissioner Rubio will be, but I'll keep talking to the mayor's office. Because it's sometimes you hear like, oh, that's not important right now. Well, is it only important at the end of a severe weather incident when we have the same repeat rinse story that we've had for the last 5 different severe weather incidents? So that's insane. So let's stop repeating that behavior. So I wanted to let you know I'm advocating on that. I really appreciate Director Long and the team for working with me to rethink how we're moving forward with the light pole challenge that we have. It's important. We have 3 parks that are dark now, and if you connect with neighbors in those parks, they'll let you know that, and they'll tell you what they really think. At least that's what they've been telling me. So we have to make sure that we listen to them and that we're being responsive and that we're doing our best to get the new ones up, and we're mitigating best we can with some temporary lighting. And thank goodness, the long days of daylight savings time are almost here. So I'm grateful it's not September right now, but I'm having this conversation. And then finally, I wanted to acknowledge Todd and Sarah Huggins. Yeah, for staffing me. I felt like I was doing one cold call after another about parks districts. I really didn't know what I was talking about, but I was doing it anyway, because that's what you do sometimes. This job is you fake it till you can make it. And when I heard that Commissioner Fish was really clear that a parks district would be a smart way to look at the, say, the infrastructure, the fiscal infrastructure for the long term of a great city with great parks. And I could see why the more I finally dove into it. And with each meeting with the representative, I would understand it more. The good news is we got farther than ever before. We actually got a committee hearing. We know what the pushback is. And so in the off season, between sessions is really when you need to do that work. I had a conversation with government relations that we need to make this a priority in the off season. So we can go in with some momentum next time. I don't want to do cold calls in the short session. And in the short session, hopefully we could get it through the committee quickly and get it onto the floor. And then be more like our neighbors up north who passed it in 2002. And then in Seattle, they established park districts in 2014, I think. So we want to be like them when we grow up sometimes, and this is an example of that. And I hope the Parks Board next time is involved in this. I did sometimes feel alone. I'm not mad at you, it's not your fault, but it did feel, we need some enthusiasm as we work in the off season moving towards this, so we can win next time. And we didn't lose this time. Again, we inched it forward. That's how legislation is, but let's really mobilize and get prepared. If in fact you all agree and we're aligned, and you think that is a smart way to move forward. And so thanks for listening to me just rattle off the 5 things that I thought was important for me to share with you. And there could be more, but there's only so much time. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. Well, you've got a lot of agreement in the context of, you know, the sustainable funding has been at the top of our list for a really long time. There's a number of board members for whom that is, you know, we bring it up pretty much every time we talk about, you know, the budgetary process and things like that. It's also fitting that you're bringing up the plazas. We do have an action item. We're gonna see if we can throw some of our support behind the efforts for O'Brien Square and potentially the I think it's over, where is it?
That one.
Over here,
That
the yeah.
Yeah, right there.
I get in this room and then I can't figure out where I am. So, you know, and I really appreciate you bringing up the issues related to workforce, because, you know, that is a really, really important one for us. And, you know, in terms of being able to build our capacity, it's not just about facilities, but about ensuring that we've got that workforce and the labor available to do that. So thank you very much for that. And, you know, let's stay in touch. I think Karen mentioned that you'd like your next visit to be in about a quarter. So we're looking at, you're gonna be back in July, whether you like. it.
I'll come whenever.
Yeah, that sounds
good
great.
weather, long days.
We'll put a tickler there and
Okay.
yes, it'll be sunny until after the meeting is done, if we're still having it at 5 to 7 at that time.
Sounds good.
Great, thank
All
you.
right.
Any questions for the commissioner?
I have a question just in terms
Yeah.
of being curious about the strategy in the off season to start building base for the Parks District in Portland. So that's something that we're mapping out currently.
Yeah, we got some advice from our government relations office. Let the legislators finish out the session. So we leave them alone until June. And then, you know, in July, August, September would be a good time as they can come take a break, come back to their offices when they have some downtime. And then really, we should rally around, starting with our Portland representatives and senators. Make sure that we really have the Portland delegation just locked in. That's something we should do in the off season, and it would have been great to have that support this time.
Great.
It's a good
That
place
sounds
to
like a good
start.
Plan.
Yeah, it's a good
And-
place to start.
And then partnering with having someone like yourself, anyone on the board, be a part of those site visits with electeds always helps a lot.
Yeah, I think for a number of us, we've seen the district as the way to address the deferred maintenance backlog, that nothing else is really gonna be able to touch that, and that over time really has potential to be very devastating to this park system if we continue to fall behind. So very encouraged to hear that process is underway.
I think it really is. I think we definitely moved the needle right direction. Yeah. But hold us accountable to, you know, we say off season, but there's a reason why a lot of times, you know, we forget what's the off season. Next thing you know, you're back to severe weather, right? Sessions feel like severe weather. And so, yeah, we have to make sure that we are really strategic. It's all about preparation. You win when you're prepared.
Yeah.
And we kind of were playing the game in the session while it was already going, and their plates are pretty full. So it was hard to squeeze it into their attention span.
I wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time to come speak with us tonight, Commissioner Ryan, and I really appreciated you taking the time to speak about the activation of the downtown spaces. And there is this issue of talking about the transition into the new city government and really less than a quarter of the population of the city of Portland is on the west side of the river. And while the activation of the downtown space and the downtown parks and those spaces is really important, with less than a quarter of the population really focused on the west side, we still need a really focused activation of our parks and recreation on the east side of the city, especially when we're as a matter of equity for BIPOC communities. And I was wondering if you could just speak a little bit as a matter of equity for parks and recreation of what that means for you and how you're going to continue to have that as a focus.
It's a
moving
yes
forward.
and,
Yeah.
of course, I agree with you 100%. And if we want to have life flowing, revenue flowing to
Mhm.
all of our city, we're in red alert when it comes to downtown. When we continue to have reputation damage that's pretty severe right now, and it stems from many people coming to downtown and they're just not feeling a lot of life and activity. And it's not good for the city. It's not good for the economy of the entire city. So again, this is the heart pumps out to the soul of the city, which is out in all over the city and far north and far east, and it's an and equation. We've got to figure out how to do both.
I think for parks, the summer free for all program, for instance, it's focused in neighborhoods, as the commissioner said. So I think we're doing a lot of activities proactively that has a lot of kind of taxpayer support. And there are opportunities, I think, as the commissioner's identifying with private partners, nonprofit and event promoters in the downtown area, that there's ideas out there that we could stimulate. I mean, Pioneer Courthouse Square has over 300 events just on that one block. And we have other similar spaces, smaller, that aren't activated. So it's kind of cracking that nut, like, how do we do that? And I think we can do both.
And I'll just add, just because my job is very technical and budget, where the resources are, it doesn't have to be with the parks resources that are dedicated to summer free for all and on the east side. There are models where we can find partnerships with Prosper Portland and use different sources of funding or the mayor's office and entirely. So it's adding on to what the Bureau Foundation has built and past board members have built within the Bureau.
Like that.
I like promising a whole bunch of money on your behalf. No, I'm joking. Do not put that in the minutes.
If we are being recorded, so. Thank you. Any
I'm
other,
doing that thing where I'm reading. That's nice. It's nice.
any other questions or comments for the commissioner while we still have him? But we still will have you.
Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah.
To be clear.
I've say the site visit I did, was it just last week out at Roma Village? What's that
Multnomah
called?
Arts Center
Yeah, that was amazing.
and then Southwest Community Center.
Yeah, that was fun.
We'll be in North Portland this week, is that right?
Yeah,
Thank you, Michelle. Michelle knows where we're going to be.
It's gonna be the North Portland Aquatic Center site visit, so you're gonna be visiting all three.
The three sites.
Oh, great. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
You'll be with Robin and Ken.
Great.
And then can I share your secrets that the commissioner goes without me on the weekends because it's a variety of parks, but I won't share your schedule because I don't even know it. So he's been all over north and northeast, I think. Last month, you probably 3 weekends out of the month.
Yeah,
Yeah. So there are official site visits and then there's the unofficial ones. He's checking stuff out.
well, when people reach out to your office and they say very concrete things, I like to have a visual in my own insight moment. It's like be more responsive.
I refer to.
I'll
it as-
stop there because it's messy, right? So, yeah, people love their parks and they feel really passionate and even territorial about the ones. It's kind of like, reminds me of the schools, like it's my school, it's my neighborhood school. And they only see that, and that's okay. And we have to see the whole thing back to downtown plazas, East Portland, North. We have to see the entire entry. We have to see the whole thing. So it's good to know how real it is, and sometimes the only way to understand it is to go there by yourself. And no one really knows who you are if you're dressed properly. Since everyone met me on Zoom, they're always shocked I'm 5'6", so.
That was your incognito.
Yeah.
I often approach the park bees. I'm like, hey. They of course have no idea who I am, which is helpful.
Yes.
And then I come back and I send messages to Tanya.
On that site visit, I just have to add with this, it was heartening to go to Selwood Park. And to be with people that signed on to work at parks because they love nature, they want to engage with Portlanders about the restoration of our wildlife areas, our nature trails, and to see the impacts of the crisis, the humanitarian crisis on our streets that goes into our parks, and the devastation of what the camp with the chemicals has caused is really, it's sad. It's really profoundly sad. And it's difficult to talk about because of course you care about the humanitarian crisis and you don't like to see the devastation of our wildlife areas. That like 10 years of work can be destroyed with just a few days of some rough unsanctioned camping. And so I just want to acknowledge all of the park employees that are dealing with conditions that a lot of Portlanders wax on about, do Zoom meetings and have strong opinions about, but aren't directly dealing with this stuff. This stuff is grim and it's challenging, it's uncomfortable, and we gotta tell the truth, and we have to not be in denial about how challenging these problems are. And they're really taking down a lot of our assets in our parks. And I know that you all know that, but I want you to know I see it. And it's why I connect the dots, but why we need to have services really hit the ground, and the state and the city shame on the decades and decades of lack of investments in mental health and behavioral health. I'm tired of living in a state with the least amount of services and the highest addiction rates that are untreated. And it's impacting our parks big time. And I know you all know that, and I didn't mean to leave on a downer note. I just wanted to give you a fact that I experienced. It was sad.
Thank you. We do have, we do have a hand up. Corbin?
Thank you. And again, thank you so much, Commissioner Ryan, for attending. I think the board too would love to be in community and visit parks. And we tried to be in community at particular recreation centers. And unfortunately, the lack of Wi-Fi, the capacity, the bandwidth capacity, I believe, at recreation centers have prevented us from being in community. With that said, being a champion of parks is not just about green spaces, but also access issues. And it would be really great if you can review or think through a process to have the Wi-Fi available at recreation centers, so we as a board can actually meet community where they are. So just something to throw out there. Thank you.
To clarify, Corbin, I think that it's a combination of Wi-Fi and the audio available at community centers. I think at Community Music Center, it was principally the audio that was the problem. So
Whatever the arrangement is that allows us to use Wi-Fi and be in community, that would be great.
That note, I'll just end with, it was great to be in community. Most people were in person out at East Portland. It's a rec center.
Community
Community Center.
Yeah, I know where I was, but it's the community center, right? And it was at all the East Portland neighborhood associations were there. It was a beautiful room, and everyone really feels at home there. And it was just a great connection where parks and neighborhood association work and community work all come together. Yeah.
It would be great to have a.
It's time to stop the divisiveness of all of these fiefdoms, but how they really come together. And I know that parks is a place where that organic convening takes place. And Portlanders are ready to have some joy and to celebrate again. So it'll be a fun summer. I look forward to seeing all of you out in community at some of these activation events that were mentioned earlier. Yeah.
Great.
All right.
Thank you. Yeah, we hope to have a future board meeting at EPCC, hopefully.
EPCC, right,
Yep.
right.
So, thank
All
you.
right, take care, everyone. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Now off to an arts event.
All right, let's see. Did we have any other questions for the Board Affairs Working Group? I realize I cut that one off pretty abruptly when the commissioner arrived. Good.
I guess I'm a little bit out of the loop. When he was talking about severe weather. What exactly was he referencing? There's a county and.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a crack at this at a very high level, and I'm gonna look to director and deputy director to back me up here. So when there's a severe weather event, either severe cold or hot, the county basically takes over a number of city-run assets, including community centers, for either cooling shelters in severely hot weather days or warming shelters in the opposite. And the challenge has been for parks is that in doing so, it makes parks and the recreation programming that's already in place in those facilities has to be suspended. So it causes disruption for swim lessons, for classes of other types. And you know, it's a problem because then we've created other problems by you know, having the communities, the vulnerable communities come in and use these facilities for purposes for which they were not intentionally designed, but which are needed. So we're trying to figure out, so a challenge is, you know, how do those communities and those needs, can they peacefully coexist and operate concurrently? And as of right now, they're not doing so. And that's kind of the challenge. So Victor,
You did beautiful. The only thing I would add is that what we would also like is for the city and county to consider longer term creating or identifying facilities for which these services can be provided to the community. Because the community centers were not purposely built for this use. And in fact, struggle, like we don't have the best HVAC and air purifying systems. And as Bonnie mentioned, it's really just displacing one vulnerable community for another. And so it's, you know, it's not just classes, it's childcare, preschool, seniors having meal programs, teens who are involved in our programs who otherwise would be up to potentially nefarious behavior. And so it really is, it's a larger problem. So there is a short-term and probably a midterm sort of solution for some coexistence, but long-term, we really need to work with the county and the city to identify.
Is there any like guidelines, some strategic plan, or how was this relationship started and there's no thinking behind it? Or?
Well, similar to how the city dealt with the houseless community and the houseless, sorry, not the community, but the houseless emergency. It has been, it's been an emergency
More
for 5 years, not right. So unfortunately, no, there has not been much planning. And we do have a new director of emergency management who is really sort of diving into it. Now there's a new director of the joint joint Office of Homeless Services. So and a new county chair. So we're really hopeful that with all this new leadership that we might be able to tackle the situation. But the fact of the matter is that these emergencies keep on happening. And guess what? It's no longer an emergency. This is like our new climate.
Regular.
And we need to be a little bit more proactive and not reactive. So.
And Metro is also part of this conversation.
In a way, Metro, the convention center has been made available for sheltering services when it's available, and some other facilities, libraries, etc. But it's, again, libraries weren't meant for that either, right? So it's a larger conversation. The Community Engagement Working Group has expressed interest, Board Affairs Working Group has expressed interest in diving into this a little bit more. So we're hoping to do that again.
Yeah, so the good news is Board Affairs Working Group is interested in delving into this a bit and helping to understand it better. And so that might be an interesting working group for you to consider joining, or at least listening in on and deciding if you want to join that. So thank you. Corbin, I see your hand is up again.
Yeah, going along with the director's report and this conversation, do we have, could you let us know the days that the warming shelters were activated? And also, do you happen to have how many programs that were disbanded during that time? And how many people were displaced during that shelter activation? If you don't have it now, that's fine. I'm just wondering if we can get those numbers later on if you don't have it.
Yeah, we have impact to services for, I believe, probably the last 3 or 4 weather events, if not more.
I think that would be really helpful for our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no other questions for the Board Affairs Working Group, we'll move to the questions for the Community Engagement Working Group to Aaron and Corbin. Any questions on that report? Or any brief summary that you want to provide? I don't see Aaron, so I guess I'll be Corbin.
No, she's there.
Oh, where are you, Aaron? Oh, there you are, Aaron. I see you. I see you now. Thank you.
It's like the tulip ballpark.
I know you blended in with your tulip background. If there are no questions there, we'll move to the nominating committee report. Alana. Oh, I guess we do have questions because we don't have a report there. So I know that the applications are live and we had an initial meeting. And any other update?
And I apologize for not getting a report in. Applications are live. We had an initial meeting going over some of the materials And at this point, for board members who aren't part of that committee, the most important thing that we are asking you to do is make sure to get those applications out to your networks. We have a board that has a fantastic diversity of networks across the city, and we'd like to be able to leverage that to make sure that we get some great applications in. We are going to have 2 seats to fill, so it's a smaller list than in past years, but we have been really lucky to have amazing applicants in the past, and to be in a position where we got to say to people, we would like you to apply in the future, because there were so many fantastic applicants, and it would be nice to be in that same position again this year. So please make sure that you are sharing that application, and we will have more information as we move through the process over the next couple weeks to month.
Thank you, Alana. So please do share that out to your networks. Spread it on whatever social media platform you like to use for that kind of thing, because we'd love to get some good applications. With that, we'll move to land use and infrastructure, which actually does have a couple of action items that I alluded to and that we referenced. David or Randy, or both?
David, were there any other items that you wanted to share before I jump into these?
No, I think just my only, can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, good. My only preamble was that I think we wanted to, as a group, craft and potentially draft 2 letters in support of the O'Brien Square effort, as well as the Thompson Elk statue effort. And Randy's going to give us some more background, but I think the intent would be for us to craft letters of support from the board. Let's take it away, Randy.
Yeah, and I'm just going to request that we do them one at a time, just in case further discussion
Okay.
purposes. Thank you.
Yep.
So I realize that probably some of you don't really have much background on this, so I'm gonna give you some, hopefully not too much. It's got a spin. Oh, no. Oh, there we go.
Yep.
So we've been working on these 2 projects for quite a long time. And in O'Brien's case for years, actually. I'll start with the Elk, which is kind of at a really important decision point. So the Thompson Elk was taken down, during the racial justice protests. And it has caused a lot of heartache. And it was kind of a funny thing because it was sort of taken care of by 4 different bureaus. And kind of nobody really wanted to take full responsibility for it. And so this is kind of an area that the foundation has previously thrived in. And so we took it on. And we commissioned a feasibility study. We found a willing donor. We commissioned a feasibility study. Also want to add that the council on May 11th passed a resolution to fully restore and return the Elk. And we've done these kinds of, multi-bureau projects, before in various ways. We assembled a really great group of historic preservationists to oversee our work because there was a little bit of division in the preservation community and the Elk community, let's call it. So we brought a lot of people together to really underline the credibility of the process. We hired a very experienced architecture firm, preservation architecture firm that's worked in Salem, that has worked on the roof of the city hall next door. They're very experienced, worked all over the West Coast. And we also hired a couple of historians to really look into the Elk because, obviously monuments are a very, difficult thing these days. And so we brought on somebody to really look at the history of the Elk and it's the person who commissioned it, and then also the social history of it since. On that front, we discovered that David P. Thompson, who commissioned the Elk, was on the right side of history, however accidentally for a man of his time. He was a sheepherder who ultimately became the mayor of the city. He was an abolitionist who stood against Chinese exclusionary laws, and he donated the elk as a monument to the Oregon Humane Society, which he co-founded and chaired. And the elk has been, a beloved civic symbol for the city, but by its adjacency to the government buildings, it has stood at the center of protests for decades. And we also, our research that Milo did, our contemporary historian, was the 2020 damages were not a result of targeted vandalism. They were collateral damage, high emotions. Some of the examples, Wobblies, class struggle, veterans parade to protest financial hardship. It has a really illustrious history of looking over, ferment of times. And there's even a great quote from Oregonian in 1921 that Portland's safety valve is Lonsdale Square, which is of course adjacent to the elk. People come to blow off pressure. So our goals were to figure out how to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, and really restore and rehabilitate it, but also to seismically stabilize it and to add a recirculating pump, the gravity-fed pump. And then also civic objectives, to position the elk as a return to as a unifying civic gesture and to pair public investment with a wide-reaching crowdsourced philanthropic campaign. So we have a lot of community participation in the return of the elk. We looked at all the pieces. There was a lot of damage. We discovered that about 18 new stone pieces will probably need to be replaced. You can see some of the damage here. The fountain basins were particularly badly damaged, and then of course the seismic stabilization and thing. So what we came out with was basically a $2.2 million budget, all in, plus about $200,000 in design fees, design engineering, and the city's insurance will pay about $700,000 is the best estimate at this point. And our proposal that we put before the city is that the foundation will pay for the design and engineering, the full set of drawings. We only took it to 30%. It needs to be 100%. And if the city allocates construction funds in the 23-24 budget. So that's the deal we put in front of the city. We've raised over half of what we need to do that from some great donors, Tim and Mary Boyle and John Russell and William Hawkins, who's been the great champion of the elk, all kicked in $25,000 and a bunch of other people. And then we do plan to go out, pending city council's vote in favor of this, to go out for a crowdfunding campaign. We'll probably do a poster and do all this stuff to really make it a civic thing. And so that's the first project. I'm happy to answer questions. Our hope would be that the board would write a letter of support of this deal. Oh, I forgot to mention one last thing. By us doing the contract drawings, it will expedite the process by a year, because if the city if the city did the design and engineering, they would have to start over. And it would be a procurement process and then all the time to do that. And we can go ahead and just get going on that and get it done really quickly, much faster than the city. So it'll make things happen a lot quicker.
Thank you, Randy. I see Casey has his hand up.
Thank you, Randy. This is a great proposal, and I think the elk is an amazing thing. But I want to make sure I understand exactly what you're looking for. Is it that you want us to request City Council simply approve it, or that they take money from some other budget than parks and bring it in so they can build it?
No, this would be general fund.
Okay.
Basically, this would be out of the mayor's budget. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for the clarification, Casey. Chris?
Just trying to do quick math here. So is the pending ask 1.5 million
Correct.
general fund? Okay.
Yeah.
David?
I had the same question. I was trying to get to the remainder. Thank you.
Twin?
So with the crowdsourcing, the last part that you described will be general public to bring in the needed 1.5 million?
No. We would crowdsource for the remainder of the design and engineering fees. So we have about 50,000 more to raise. But we wanted to show strength. We've got this, raising money is never easy, but there's a lot of interest in this project. So we think we throw it out to the public upon the city council's approval of 1.5 and have the 1.5 million for construction. And then we'll bring it.
So if there's no public dollars from the city, do you see that there is any opportunity that the community will actually outsource this?
1.5 million, no.
Yeah.
Because the engineering, I thought you said it was 200,000,
200,000.
so you're 200,000 into it, so we still need the construction of 1.5 mil.
Yeah, so our net, what we will raise is and have mostly raised is $200,000 to complete 100% drawings. We are saying we will do that if the city provides the construction money. I can safely tell you that there is not a lot of there's not a $1.5 million in the in private philanthropy community for this. There's I've had some really hard conversations about people's feelings about this and the city right now. And it's a lot of money and there's a lot of need out there, and then there's also a lot of as I'm sure you're aware as an architect, a lot of difficulty right now amongst traditional funders, real estate interests. I mean, I've had conversations with people that are extremely generous property owners in downtown, and they're walking back, gifts to major cultural organizations, right now. So,
What about BRAC and then Adam
back for funding?
for any kind of support?
Well, they're taking care of the statue. That's their job. Yeah, we're working on that.
Adam,
Yeah, sure.
Thanks so much for sharing all that history. That's a lot of stuff that I didn't know. I'm curious if for everybody, you could describe what the alternative is. So if this project fails, what happens to the space? What are other options for the space? Is there a cheaper option? Is there a more expensive option? Curious if you could talk through that with us.
I can't really speak to that. I would say I don't know what would happen, with the space. That's not what we've been working on. We initially looked at some alternatives, which actually got us in a lot of trouble because there was some feeling that on the part of PBOT and TriMet that they first didn't want the fountain back at all. And then we looked at some scenarios for reducing the scale of the base to make it, less, an impediment in the road to buses and stuff. And the blowback was swift and hard from the preservation community. There was no appetite for that whatsoever. So if city council doesn't allocate the money, the donors that we have assembled so far will walk.
And
Casey, sorry,
no,
go ahead.
I don't want to jump Casey. I'll go after Casey.
Sorry. Casey.
Yeah, and this is actually a new question. I want you to appreciate, Randy, this is coming as I'm trying to draft a letter in my head of in support.
Yeah,
But I think I asked this question 2 years ago. I'm not sure I ever got a straight answer. Is a statute in the middle of a street parks jurisdiction?
No, Parks has traditionally taken care of the fountain. It's PBOT land. But it is, Parks adjacent. It's just the funny way that our government works that, there's so many, hands on the steering wheel.
Is that a transportation?
Hey,
Transportation.
Yes.
at this point, we do have another action item, so I'm going to see if I might entertain a motion from the floor of any kind.
I move that the Parks Board draft a letter in support of supporting Parks Foundation with the fundraising for the completion of the design.
Terrific. David, as chair of the Land Use Infrastructure Working Group Committee, is that a responsibility you and others can take on,
Yes,
verifying?
yes.
Casey, is that a legacy hand?
No, and I'm sorry, I just want, I would ask Paul to consider amending the motion by making it specific that the money comes from a source other than the parks budget.
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you for the motion. Thank you for the friendly amendment. Casey, any second from the floor?
I'll second it.
I'll second with Casey's amendment.
Whoa, that was Mike and Alana and somebody else speaking.
Adrian. Can we get a rewording of what the motion is so I can take that down?
Okay, rewording is,
The Parks Board is making a pledge to support Parks Foundation in raising the remainder of the design money for the fountain restoration, and specifically asking that the money not come from the general fund.
the construction money.
Construction money not come, thank you.
No, not come from the parks
Not
budget.
from the parks.
Correct,
From the
sorry.
general fund, but not from the parks budget.
Yes,
Sorry.
yeah, that's all right.
Can you read that back?
Yeah, that
I
doesn't-
think it got a little tangled.
I haven't.
All right, all right, I think I got the spot. You're a stenographer.
So Paul, one more time.
All right, one last time with feeling.
Okay.
Okay, so the Parks Board is asking to support Parks Foundation in completion of the design for the replacement of the Thompson Fountain. Elk Fountain, and we're asking for the city to step up with the remainder of the construction funds from the general fund, not from Parks funding.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
And we'll add the specific amounts if you'd like.
Yeah, 1.5 million.
We'll add the. specific-
200,000 and 1.5.
Third time was a charm.
What they
All
said.
right, any further discussion? We have motion, second, restating. No more discussion. All in favor? Aye. Any opposition?
Some reservation. Strategy wise. It's a really tough one.
So you're abstaining or you're voting in opposition?
I have reservation. I think it's a little bit awkward for the parks. We will support, but yet don't use our money. And so it's always great to have someone else spend the money. But we, as parks, have very strapped budgets, and so ideally, I would say parks will put in some. And then the city put in some, so there's some kind of matching or whatever. But if we don't step up and then say, well, the city should just do it. That letter is kind of a bit disgenuine in how it's kind of proposed.
I hear what you're saying, but I think a key question that Casey asked, I think is really relevant here, which is, it's a statue in the middle of the street. And the only actual relationship to parks is truthfully that it's between Lonsdale and Chapman Squares. Is that correct? So we actually, Parks Bureau doesn't have jurisdiction.
Well, we maintain the fountain
Okay,
portion of the statue.
so you maintain the fountain. We, the Parks Bureau, maintains the fountain, but has no other jurisdiction over that.
That is correct.
So, I guess the question is, in terms of, I hear what you're saying. But I think that that's an important component here, which is it is a larger city asset in which the various bureaus, are required to sort of coordinate. But I hear what you're saying.
It's just the optics is a little bit.
I hear you.
Did Adrian's comment in the comment get answered? The questions in the chat?
So Ilana's hand is up and Adrian did comment, who could object to this, but how does the Bureau feel about this? What are the trade-offs that will happen regarding other Bureau requests?
Yeah.
And I think by saying that it would not come out of the Bureau budget, it would have zero impact, is my understanding.
There's basically.
Yeah.
So the skin in the game, Parks and Recreation is the ongoing maintenance. Along with that, responding to the speaking for this group over here, that's Fountain Team, they're responding to, I mean, our team in land stewardship as well, responding to feedback. I think the other skin in the game I see is the Parks Foundation is facilitating. It's not part of the Bureau. Foundation is part of this.
Then maybe the letter should emphasize. Just said. We are putting something forward, ongoing maintenance. The city puts it in, we will take care of maintenance.
Right, so there is an impact to the O and M budget,
Right.
correct?
Right.
Are we committing to that? I mean,
Do we
is
know
that
how
even
much that
possible?
is?
Well, I mean, is that a priority? I mean, I feel like we have these conversations around like healthy parks, healthy
Yeah.
Portland and the system overall. And then we have kind of one-off things that come to the board and we're supposed to put support. How does that sit with the rest of the things that we talk about, but don't write a letter of support on each project? So that's why my like reservations are, because does this unintentionally say this is the number one thing that Parks Board is thinking about, or number two, or number three?
I think that's all valid. I mean, I guess. I mean, I think there's a few ways we can look at this, if I can sort of. Think about this. I mean, I guess if we think about it in the context of Commissioner Ryan's high priorities, right? Plazas and public activation is part of that. And I see this as being an important piece of that. And I do see an opportunity for the foundation partnership to be strengthened in this way. You know, this isn't my issue necessarily, but I do want to ensure that all the voices are heard. I also see a lot of your hand has been up for a while.
So I appreciate both of these comments and reservations, and even more than that, I appreciate that we're having a full discussion about something like this. The beauty, I think, in asking for these funds to come from the general fund is what we are saying as a board is, yes, this is important. This is something that was part of parks, is still part of parks, not our land, but our maintenance. But that it shouldn't come out of anybody's budget, right? We're not saying take it out of PBOT's budget. We're not saying take it out of somebody else's budget. We're saying out of that general fund, out of that pot that the mayor has access to. Let's make sure that when we talk about extras, right? Not weighing this against what the parks already have set aside as priorities, but when we talk about extras, let's take some of the money out of the extras pot that the city has to do this. And I actually think that the beauty of specifying the general fund is that we are not making it somebody else's problem where we have to match it. We're very clearly stating this is an extra, but it's an extra that should be done.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't notice your thing with them. Oh, legacy.
Everyone else has made my points, so.
Okay, very good. So should we revote, or are you abstain or are you against? I just want to be clear, because I want to make sure that you're heard.
Me?
Yeah, I think it was the two of you. Unless anybody else has changed their vote. I think everybody else was voting in favor. Unless I'm mistaken, speak up, park board people.
We're gonna have another project.
We
right?
are,
Yeah.
so I want to get this one squared away.
This one's O'Brien, right?
No,
The next one's
That's
O'Brien.
Okay.
So are you abstaining or are you voting against? I want to just have it noted correctly.
I think I'm leaning towards against.
Glenn?
Because Commissioner Ryan was here talking about activation. Here's a beautiful statue, we can't actually get to. So when, in terms of activation, it's a little bit going against what he was trying to focus on. And so when we say activation, cars are still running around the statue, we put it there. And so I have a harder time to say, ask for money. And yet we just heard that activating downtown plazas. And it would be great if this can be at somewhere that kids can go up, touch it.
Fair enough. So you're
I
voting
will-
against.
I will go against.
Okay, very good. Alejandro, and then we do need to move to.
We can move
O'Brien.
forward.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. So did we get the, right, okay, great. Moving on to O'Brien Square. David and Randy.
All right. So, as those of you have heard me talk about before, we just did a community vision project around O'Brien Square, which has been closed for 5 years in the center of the city. It was designated Park Block 1 in the city first city plat, was sold off at one point and then returned in the 70s. We put together a great group of supporters for this, ranging from Metro to Multnomah County and a lot of private interests, and of course Portland Parks and Recreation put up $70K for this study. We worked with PSU's Center for Public Interest Design. We did 6 webinars. We had over 400 survey responses, 8 stakeholder focus groups, 2 community open houses, and we did a lot of interviews and in-person engagement. And what was loud and clear about this was, there were a lot of ideas. We had many ideas, but what people most wanted was to feel safe there, and that the activation and future programming be community led. That this could be a park that could really begin with the community. We tend to, design parks and then kind of figure out to program them, and this is an opportunity to kind of reverse that way of being. So what we've laid out, the charge to PSU was to come up with some long-term visions for the square, but also to come up with some short-term activations, because it's going to be demolished and it's probably going to be done mid-fall or winter. And as we've learned with the fences that have been around it, those are breachable, and it's been, a very, very difficult place. And there's a lot of reasons for that, which I'll get into. Cursor. We heard that, some people want green space, night use, recreation, community service was a big theme. As I mentioned, community-led programming. And there were a lot of groups. We had over 30 arts groups who showed up for one of our stakeholder groups, and everybody from OMSI to neighbors like Literary Arts and the Symphony, and a lot of grassroots groups are really, really interested in this. There's an opportunity to kind of create a community potluck here of cultural offerings. And then, of course, food has been an important part to O'Brien Square's history, because it used to be adjacent to really the first and largest food cart pod. We asked people what safety looked like, and we got a range of responses from, of course, security cameras, but lighting was big, adjacent business activity, cultural representation was an important piece. And as I mentioned, demolition could be completed as pretty quick, and so there's needs to be an activation for the square immediately upon those fences coming down. there's some code changes that we discovered that we need to work out that could help that, because there's sort of zones where the parks rangers can't go and where clean and safe can't go, and there's kind of a gap in between that. And then there's absolutely going to need to be funding. So there's a lot of players in this, but bottom line is it's happening on a timeline in which any kind of activation is going to need to begin with public money for all the reasons that I talked about with the Elk not being able to raise a lot of private funding. We think there's possibilities out there, but it's got to be city first. I'm missing a couple of things here. Oh, I wanted to give you a little bit of context here.
So Randy, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We are 10 minutes behind on.
Okay, sorry.
Already, and I'm guessing there's gonna be questions. So
Yeah.
maybe let's move to the ask and then, maybe just.
Well, I think it's important to understand one thing, that the census tract of downtown looks a lot like Cully. And it's 30,000 people who live adjacent to this park in downtown. And so I think we need to keep in mind that there is a living population downtown that's mostly low income people. Or people who live in low income housing, and it's important to think about that. It may be a certain percentage. There's also nothing to activate the park naturally. There's telco equipment that has turned a lot of the buildings into empty buildings, and so the activation had to bring the party to the park. So there's a couple of factors that are really important. Again, basically what we're looking for is support to activate this plaza, because otherwise it will be empty in as early as fall, and is has a really tough social context. And so what we would really like is support from the Parks Board for channeling again some one-time money toward getting this thing off the ground, because otherwise we're going to have a real problem.
Do we have a scale of the ask? What is?
Not yet, unfortunately. This is such a, we're building the plane as it goes down that runway. And so we're, making up a management team for it. It'll probably be either not privately, but it'll probably be a public-private partnership that manages it.
Thank you. I see Alejandro, Ilana, and then Adam.
Randy, quick clarification to understand the timeline. Is the idea of the activation to do it before the demolition, in lieu of the demolition, or is it one thing doesn't exclude the other? I'm trying to understand when we.
Yeah, sorry, a little bit clear. I don't have such a polished presentation.
No, it's
that's
okay.
asked. I have lots of presentations on O'Brien, but this one I had to kind of make up on the last minute. So basically what's happening is the square is going to be demolished, and it will be left with as many trees that can be saved, and it'll be just a space. There'll be some
Including
combination.
the parking lot.
The parking will be gone.
Okay.
So it'll be just kind of like a European square, really. But it's in a tough social, circumstance. There's a lot of social services on one side, and then the Ritz-Carlton on the other. So you've got the extremes of society on each side, and we're trying to make a welcoming place for everybody. But there's not enough money currently identified within SDCs, which is the primary funding for capital improvements, to do a full-on redesign of the plaza. So what we have proposed is that there's an interim activation until that money can be identified. And that's what we're looking for this one time and quick support for, is to create positive activity that we can actually learn from for the final design.
Thank you. Ilana and Adam.
Randy, can you, maybe I just missed it, in which case I'm sorry, but when you say create interim activation, is the funding that you are asking for the Parks Board to support, this unknown amount of funding, for programming, or is it to maintain the space over the interim? Is it to, what is it that we are actually talking about spending the money on that you need?
Programming and activation, Ilana.
What does activation mean other than programming in this case?
In this case, it would mean activities that are managed by a management entity. We don't know what that looks like yet. But we're working on it. And the thing is in order for anything to happen there, if we're going to take advantage of many arts groups and cultural groups that would like to do programming there, we need to have a management entity that is funded, and we need to have stipends to, to pay people. So that would be the kind of activation. There's some other ideas about potentially some food carts there, that could provide, some support. And, but there has to be somebody who is managing that.
So the space would remain a brick and paved space that could be used for various things, looking much like it does now. And this funding would go for a management company and some initial events until additional funding was available. Kind of
Correct.
concept
Yeah.
funding. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Adam.
Alana took quite a bit of what I was gonna ask, but I guess and correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding of this is are we writing a letter of support to say that in theory, activations and programming are a good idea in an empty lot in the middle of downtown? Because if that's the case, yes, I think programming an empty lot in the middle of downtown is a good idea. But without any dollar figure, any scope of the program, who we're gonna hire, who's gonna need to manage it, what we're gonna need to do there, who are the independent contractors, what food carts, there's just no scope. It's like asking me if I don't know if I think eating ice cream is a good idea, right? It's yes, in theory, I think that's an awesome idea, but I don't know how much ice cream I'm eating. I don't know what flavor it is. I don't know where it's been. I don't know if it's melted. And so, again, if the ask is for the Parks Board to support that we think an empty lot in downtown should be programmed, 100%, yes for it. But if we attach anything else to it, I'm not sure that I'm comfortable committing to that.
Yeah, understood.
Casey's hand is up and then Sabrina. And then we do need to move on because we have guests to talk about Title 20 and provide a recreation overview.
Thank you. And again, thank you, Randy, for the presentation. I'm totally with Adam. And I just have the additional question. Is there any opinion from Parks leadership in terms of what they think about the motion?
Right now, there is no motion on the floor.
Well, in terms of what Randy's asking for, sorry about that.
Right, so I think the discussion, and it seems like the general consensus to me, now I'm just one person, is that the idea of activating an open square in downtown is generally a good idea, but it sounds to me like people are feeling like the scale and scope is too undefined at this time to be able to support it directly. But somebody might, for example, want to make a motion that is broader and more general and might lend some support behind the concept. But again, there is no motion on the floor at this time.
Yeah, is there anything stopping community groups that are already doing work in downtown from utilizing that space once the demolition is done? You're saying the fences will go down?
Yeah.
Do you know of anything that's stopping organizations that are doing work down here utilizing the space?
Well, it needs to be organized. That's the thing, we have to invent what the organizational structure is.
I guess I mean, if Rosewood was downtown, is there anything stopping us from just saying, okay, on Saturday, we're gonna go and have a community picnic? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it would be the same thing in any part. I mean, there needs to be, management of that. I mean, it's, that's exactly the kind of thing that we're hoping for. Out of this is that, it will be a community space, but there has to be, I mean, it's, a park in it's a small park in a, dense area with a lot of social extremes in it. And so we have to be mindful of how to manage and stage those events. It's there's nothing preventing it. Would be, I mean, one of the suggestions that we really liked was that there would be basically kind of a sign up, but there still has to be somebody watching after the park. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I know it's a very vague thing. I just want you to understand that the budget wheels are turning. And we will get a proposal, to City Hall. But the timing of the Parks Board meetings and that are not in alignment. Much of the alignment in this project is not normal. But so it's a little bit of a triage. And so I hope you can, appreciate that we're very concerned about what will happen there if there isn't, some level of management and actively curated programming.
Corbin and then Adina and then Paul. I think that's the order. And then we do need to move to our other agenda items.
I feel like something is not being answered in this discourse that we're having. I believe what was put before us is that we are being asked to craft a letter in support of prioritizing O'Brien Square funding, but we don't know what that funding is at this time. Is that correct?
I think that's a pretty succinct way of putting it, Corbin.
Okay. I feel uncomfortable prioritizing O'Brien Square without understanding the other needs that are being met. I do support the square in general, but is there a way of having some sort of understanding of what that funding would be? Because otherwise, I feel like we're writing a letter for a blank check at this point. And I don't necessarily feel comfortable moving that forward as much as I support the project.
Being in the middle of a lot of budget discussions, I don't know that there's any blank checks. There's only so much money in the account.
But you say funding, but it doesn't say funding for what? It doesn't say funding for what period of time. It doesn't say funding. It's just funding. And so I think if we can get a better idea of exactly what the funding is going for or who it's going to be going to, maybe folks might feel more comfortable moving forward, but I feel like there's not enough here to make a decision at this point.
Thank you. Adina, Paul, then Ilana. And then that's the end of the discussion here.
So to your question, Sabrina, a permit and any nonprofit can have an event or an activity in any park. So that's to your question. And then to the overall conversation, I agree. We want to make sure that O'Brien Square is activated for positive uses during the interim time after the construction or the demolition of the parking garage is done and a full park is eventually funded and completed. I do not feel comfortable identifying funding for one entity to do this work. I feel like there's an opportunity to say, if we wanted to go this route, to do an RFI or to do some sort of request for proposal to do it. And so that's my general sense. And also, our commissioner has not weighed into whether or not this is a model that he would support. So I would be concerned about the board advocating for funding for something that may not be supported by the commissioner. And so I think writing letters in support of downtown plazas, including the demolition and, building and activation of O'Brien Square is perfectly reasonable, but I don't think that there should be a funding amount or a model that is proposed in a letter.
Thank you, Paul, and then Ilana.
Maybe the easiest thing here, and I know Randy, you're juggling a lot of schedules, is to come back in a month when there's more definition of what the ask might be.
Ilana.
I was going to propose a motion, but if we want to move in the direction of having Randy come back in a month instead, I'm happy to not propose a motion.
Okay.
Bonnie, what?
I think I think that sounds fine. I mean, there's no motion on the floor. And Randy, is it possible that this can add, we could get some specificity added to a potential proposal that we might be able to react to at the land use and infrastructure working group and then at this meeting?
It's about a month starting on Friday, so, yeah. Yeah, I understand
So, but,
everybody's
yeah,
concerns.
or if there's somebody who can
Uh,
provide that information in your stead. But we appreciate hearing about it and I mean, O'Brien does need something. There's no question about that. Thank you for bringing it to us.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to Title 20 update. I'm very sorry that we
I'm
are,
actually gonna flip these. I'm gonna-
okay,
Recreation
recreation
first. They
first.
have a longer presentation.
okay, so,
And more people.
okay, so. So, Max mowing team.
And we know how
please,
fast
you're
Victor
on.
can talk.
If it's possible to try and keep your presentation to around 15 minutes, that would be delightful. And if you don't, I'm gonna interrupt you at 6:45 anyway to see if there's anybody who's shown up for public comment.
Michelle, can you either let me share through the Zoom or will you pull it up? You should be able to share.
So yeah,
Oh, yeah.
as they get that set up, I could start this off really quick. So for those that I might not see regularly, I'm Maximo Behrens. I'm the Recreation Division Manager. And I'm joined here by some, not all, of the very dynamic recreation management team. I'll have them introduce themselves as they also share parts of the presentation as we go. But we wanted to come talk today. We can talk for a very long time, but we're going to make it a very short presentation because we would like some time for to answer some questions and be able to have some discussion as well around recreation programming. With that, so when we talk about recreation programming, I know it goes without saying that recreation, Parks and Recreation is a lot of programs and a lot of engagement for the community. And so we've got listed up there how recreation is structured. And so recreation is includes community centers, so all the programming that takes place there. We've got 5 regional centers and 3 neighborhood centers where programming takes place at. We've got arts, culture, and special events. So that's our summer free-for-all. That's our lunch and play program, and is also our cultural programming, Multnomah Arts Center, Community Music Center, and Interstate Firehouse Cultural Center. And then we've got our sports and aquatics program. So that's our tennis program, our Golden Ball program, and then tennis, as well as maintenance of the fields and activation of the fields across the city. And we have recreation strategies and initiatives, which includes a lifelong recreation, senior lifelong recreation. And then we've got adaptive and inclusive recreation and our team program and many partnerships. And we've got our recreation support systems. And so recreation support systems, they help assist the division doing a lot of marketing and doing a lot of centralized work, as well as hiring, as well as analytics that they really help to pull together and support the division with. And then recreation also has enterprise funding. So it's our 5 publicly run golf courses, as well as the Portland International Raceway. And so when we are going to be talking about programming for this presentation today, we're actually going to be talking about general fund programs, and those programs that are also supported by the levy. Golf and PIR do very dynamic programs. They're set up different structurally, and so we can always be able to expand on those in future conversations as well. But we'll be talking about general fund programs. So I'm going to turn it over to Darrell Singleton, who's going to talk about goals and priorities for the division.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Darrell Singleton. I apologize. Maxwell's going to turn and get me on screen for the folks who are off screen right now. I am the manager of recreation strategies and initiatives. So Maximo talked a little bit about that already. But really where I talk about is that level of community programs and outreach and those efforts to diverse communities. With my colleagues, we're going to cover a variety of different points and pieces. It's okay, I can handle the lights off or on. That's good. Hey, Rob. But what I'm going to start off with is our goals and priorities. Recreation leadership over the last year has been really building the principles of cultural change. And that's really to help us kind of guide our staff and so forth in our movement in kind of achieving what the Parks Levy's goals are. So as I go, and one of the things I'll say here is, Adina said, everybody said, go fast. I can speak a little fast, so if everybody needs me to slow down, I will slow down. So I'll say that out loud. But one of the things I want to talk about is what we're committed to. So as you can see on the screen, we're increasingly committed to diversity of participants and employees, as well as creating spaces and programs for all people of walks of life. While we do that, and one of the things I've loved since we've initiated the Parks Levy, as well as Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland, is prioritizing the centered communities. We hear the term BIPOC quite often. I love to spell it out to make sure we emphasize the first talking about Black people and Indigenous people of color, focus on immigrant and refugees as well, and other people of color. But we also want to, as you'll see in my portfolio, as well as other folks' portfolios, focusing on people with disabilities, as well as older adults, LGBTQIA, as well as youth, which is a big piece of mine in my portfolio in our teen service, as well as SUN. Thank you, Jamie. Moving forward, we're starting to do this work. One of the things we've started to commit and taking accountability throughout recreation is building these equity and action committees. These committees focus on how do we implement equity in a variety of areas. And so in recreation, we built this around 4 different areas, with managers leading and being champions, as well as supervisors and full-time frontline staff having a voice and being part of these individual committees. First committee is partnerships. And you can see up there a little bit of description, but I also add, we're here to cultivate current relationships while discovering new and underdeveloped relationships with community partners, as well as providers. We also have a group called Staff Empowerment, and where we engage current staff and build up their professional muscle around equity and professional development. One of the things I always say as being a former equity practitioner is you don't know what you don't know. Okay, so it's crucial that we start to continue to improve that. Parks has been an ongoing major piece within the community. We want to add that muscle around equity as we're building relationships with the community. We also have a program area around programming where we focus on building activities. We're used to doing, we know basketball, we know golden ball, we know swimming. How do we engage those same activities with a diverse community that have felt left out? So really focusing on and building that strength and that connection. And then last, cultural and responsive customer service, and learning how to engage individuals through all walks of life. And when I use practical places like that, for many communities of color, for other marginalized communities, traditional dominant culture ways of communicating may not be familiar. How do we normalize and get them comfortable in those interactions, especially when they're calling in to our customer service lines?
Great, my turn. I'm Nancy Roth. I'm the sports and aquatic manager. I'm here to talk programming. So now that we're kind of moving out of COVID and back to reality, we're increasing our programming. So as the commissioner mentioned, our staffing numbers are looking pretty darn good. So we're going to reintroduce swim lessons to our indoor pools. We didn't have them. It used to just post-COVID, we just had lap swim fitness activities, and now we're bringing back swim lessons. Our outdoor pools, we're going to expand our swim lesson opportunities with more swim instructors. Day camps, we're expanding to better serve working families. So earlier drop-off time, which we haven't had for a bit, and then a little bit later. So folks can work a full day and get their kiddos to camp. Summer free for all. We have free lunch and play at 24 park sites, 5 mobile sites. Lunchtime, because of the heat, we're extending it 1.5 to 1.5 hours of program time, and then we're switching a little earlier. So instead of 11 to 3, we're moving it earlier in the day to beat the heat. Sue's team is also offering 36 cultural events, including a second annual East Portland Arts Festival. And then as I mentioned earlier, numbers are up. We're knock on wood, we're better than we were last year, that's for sure. We're probably around 250 of returning folks coming back to aquatics. We're looking at about 500 to start the summer. We'll also have a July lifeguard class to bump up our numbers. The dry side programming target, Jamie wrote. Thank you, Jamie. That we're at 77% of our 700 applications needed to fill 460 positions this summer. So we're doing great with that. Kudos to one, we got a wage increase for our seasonals, so that was huge. And our marketing campaign has been very, very strong, especially just putting the word out and in different languages and really casting a wide net for recruitment.
One extra slide I'm gonna add, because I found out today, we got the demographic information back from HR on our dry side seasonal candidates, and 49% identify as a race ethnicity that is not white. Wow. So we're looking at almost a 50% split for our seasonal staff this year, which is awesome.
Is that?
I think,
Okay.
yeah.
And then retention, staff retention. As you can see from this slide, once you're a Parkey, you're always a Parkey. You never leave. So this snapshot, correct me if I'm wrong, Jamie, but is for right now. So if we would take a staff retention in the summer, it would have a little different numbers, but you can see 150 of our permanent employees average about 12 years of service. 23 have served just 2 years or less. 77 are in my category, have served 10 to 32 or 100 years of parks. Non-rep leadership has served an average of 15 years. Represented staff have served an average of 10. And then you can see from our casual staff, also huge retention numbers, including 147 have served 10 to 49 years or more. So pretty good. Once you're a Parkey, always a Parkey. Still you. Oh, still me. Programming offering is growing. So this fall, recreation offered 985 registered activities. We're at 78% full. Really working on culturally specific responsive programming. Recreation continues to partner with communities to create programs designed to meet the needs of communities centered through Parks Levy commitment. And examples are in the quarterly report. So if you take a peek at that, page 7 gives you some highlights, including English as a learning language, hair braiding, and virtual fitness classes.
So the quarterly report was attached to the information that came out from Michelle, so you have access to that report. Some of the slides today are snippets pulled from there. That report is a new report. We used to have an old quarterly report many years ago. We've brought it back and we will be reporting out. It's designed specifically for our frontline staff and our programmers that are making decisions about the programs and how we're adapting to our levy goals. And it's to help them be educated as they're making those decisions. It also tells a really good story for other people too. And so we're very glad to share that with the Parks Board and with others that are interested as well. Waitlist is something that we know people are interested in. So this is one example we have in the quarterly report. It's broken out by program areas. And so you can see the program capacity and the waitlist ask by each of the programs. I'm just going to show you this one example here. So you can see, first off, last fall, we had the amount of programming on the left, and this fall we had the amount of program on the right. So we've offered almost 3 times as much programming this last fall, and we had almost 3 times the number of people enrolled. A lot of that has to do with the ability to staff up out of COVID. We will not probably see as drastic of a change from this fall to next fall. So you can see the green area is the folks that enrolled. The blue are the amount of spaces that were left in the programming that was offered by community centers. And then the yellow line kind of shows how much wait list there was. And the wait list is still within the blue. So we actually had space. People just maybe the time or the location or the type of thing offered maybe wasn't the right fit, but there was programming that was available that could have met that met that need. Now, when you look by the program areas in the quarterly report, when I can imagine when you look at aquatics, that you'll understand that that yellow line is up here, well above what was the potential for what we were able to offer. So that is, you can see sort of how that changes program by program in the quarterly report. I think it is important to note that even if our pools were operating at the fullest capacity that they're capable of, it still does not meet the need of Portlanders in this city. We don't have enough pools with size capacity to meet the whole city's need, but we're getting closer. And this summer we'll be meeting a lot more of that need than we were able to last year.
I'm going to interrupt you just for a minute. It is 6:45, and I wanted to see if any community members had shown up to provide public comment. I don't see anybody, but I wanted to verify that. Great, go ahead, Jamie.
So another really impactful piece of programming that is happening for recreation is the Access Pass, which hopefully you've all heard about. That started sort of came out of virtual programming when we shut down for COVID. When we added virtual programming in, we started a pay what you can option for those fees. So they were very low cost virtual programs, and there was an option to apply multiple discounts to bring that price down to whatever you could pay to still be engaged and connected. As we came out of COVID and we had a levy, we knew as a bureau we needed to come up with ways to address financial assistance and reduce cost as a barrier. And so we continued that pay what you can pilot that started with virtual programming into the registered activities. And so at the time of a transaction, when someone registered for a camp or a swim lesson, they would get to the amount at the end and it would be like, oh, well, you could reduce this if you want to by $3 up to 5 times. And so you could stack coupons to reduce the cost down. As we started looking at and coming back online to in-person activities, we also needed to address financial assistance for passes and for drop-in participation. And that option didn't work anymore. That worked in our registration system, but not for passes. And so a second pilot came online, which was the access discount. And so that is something that somebody signs up for in advance and can receive a 25, 50, 75, or 90% discount. Then on any pass that they purchase. So they sign up first and choose their discount, and then any drop-in that they purchase as they visit a site for one time, or any pass they purchase, that discount would apply. We did a year-long process and pilot of evaluating both of those different features. We did customer surveys for all of the users. We contracted out for community feedback. For non-users, we did staff evaluations. So we used multiple different methods to sort of evaluate those two processes. And this last fall, we moved forward with the Access Pass, which brought the registered activities into a similar system that we had been using for the day passes. So it does kind of work like a Safeway club card. So you sign up in advance, and at that time we capture information, and there is no eligibility requirements, but we do ask people to self-report their income, the number of people in their household, and their demographics. So we have very solid demographic information about the folks who are signing up and accessing the Access Pass. It is good for admissions to all of our activities, registration. It also works on personal training, and we use the same discount function for our preschool and our after-school registrations.
Thank you, Jamie. You know, we have heard a little bit about the Access Pass in the past, so I'm going to ask you to wrap it up so we do have time for Victor Vicente.
Victor, they're gonna see their time. They'll come back another time.
Okay.
So the Access Pass has really been growing in usage. Just between October and February 1st, we almost doubled the number of people who've signed up for the Access Pass. In addition to that, another item of note is that basically 1 in 5 people that are signing up for that are signing up with new accounts that are coming into our system are signing up for an Access Pass at the same time. And that's showing us that a lot more people are accessing recreation services because they can do so at a price that allows them to participate. There has been a lot of concern about what might happen to a process like this where we don't have eligibility and hoops for people to go through. And this visual right here shows the income level and the percentage that individuals are selecting. So you can see that tall green bar right there are folks choosing the 90% discount. And those are individuals who live in a household that is earning less than $24,000 a year. So you can see that the people who are using the deepest discounts are in the lower income groupings, and those who are using the 25% or the 50%, you'll see more of that usage in the higher income levels. So this really does line pretty closely with the scholarship grid that we had before, where we were requiring verification for everyone to submit and get reviewed. So there's not a lot of outliers here. We have a PREP program, which is Parks, Race, and Ethnicity Project, where we collect the demographic data. And we restarted that collection after a hiatus for 4 to 6 years. We restarted that in May of 2021. Since that time, if we look at active accounts from that point to now, only about 41.7% of the accounts have any PREP data demographics attached to them. So we don't have a very solid understanding yet of our overall user base. But what we learned in the fall report is when we looked at the new accounts that came in fall, we have PREP data for 99% of those accounts that were created. So we can tell you a great deal about the people who are newly coming into our system. We do have some steps in place to, with a new FTE that will come on in this next fiscal year to fill in some of the missing information from our ongoing and existing accounts.
So this is where I come back in.
Yep.
And I'll try to be quicker on this slide to hold time for questions. One of the other new programs we have is early registration, an opportunity for folks who've historically not been able to get into normal registration, access early to register programs that they've missed out on. One of the things we've learned in that process of changing from our old registration process to now is we used to have a scheduling process that was 6 to 12 weeks out. That was too far for a lot of our low income individuals. So we reduced that down into 2 windows that are combined between 4 and 6 weeks. With that, we allow folks to come in early, register early, working with partners, doing a lot of outreach efforts to get partners to couple and support their individual participants to come in. Many of those partners are communities of color, partners of communities of color, culturally specific agencies. Also agencies that serve many of those targeted communities that we were focused on. In this process, you can see the 22% of our fall registration 2022 were from early reg. One of the things we started to learn from that process as well is because we can't, what's the term I want to use? Discourage anyone to register. We were starting to see some of our classes, aquatics and programs, start to fill up to 100%. So one of the things we've done in this new recent change with early registration is have early registration limited to 50% of the actual schedule. So that allows for everyone access, and then they can always come back and be part of the normal registrations. If you can go ahead and go forward, Jamie, as I get to, we're doing a lot of that work also with our tabling and working with culturally specific agencies, doing our efforts, going out to individual groups, providing information. In that, we're building direct contacts and connections. We currently have 42 partnering agencies that are actively working with us in our early registration, as well as scheduling opportunities for tabling events, excuse me. So I'll stop there and leave space for questions and hand it back to Jamie.
All right, we had prepared a discussion question, but I'm not sure we have time for that, but there are some questions in the chat. Corbin, I see there's an ask to see the 49% disaggregated by race. We actually have a dashboard that reports out a live weekly updated feed of applicants. It also has the demographics on it broken by each recruitment. And at the bottom, the overall demographics broken out by race and ethnicity. So that would be an easy thing to provide. So we can make sure to do that. The next question I'm seeing here is from Aaron. Curious to know how much better aquatics will be given only 20% of the people registering got spaces last year. I do want to mention in the wait list view right here, a wait list and the number of people on a wait list can represent one individual many times. So a family that doesn't get into swim lessons might put their one child on 5 or 6 classes, or their 3 children on 5 or 6 classes. And so one person on a wait list one wait list does not equal one person. So it's important to keep that into perspective. And where we're looking at people's ask at wait list, that's them like showing us all the things they wish they could get into that are full, not one thing per one person. So
I'll
there
just
are-
add to that quickly, sorry to interrupt, but there are also people that have just given up, don't add to a wait list, don't think they're gonna get in. So honestly, 20% seems even high to me, given that I basically know hardly anybody that has gotten into swim lessons. So I think it goes both ways is all I'm saying.
Yep. Yeah, there definitely is a supply and demand challenge with the swim lessons. We are really looking forward to the benefits of the increased wages and the recruitment efforts that have been going forward. We're expecting to start the summer with almost twice the staff that we had at the beginning of last summer. So that puts us in a really good spot to be opening up a lot more spaces in swim lessons and open swim and play swim than we were able to do at the beginning of last year.
Do you have an idea like how many? You're saying more, but so it was 1,000 or whatever it was. What are you thinking now?
We're working on some models right now. We have some information to send over to Director Long on what the capacity in the pool is. It basically lines out, we have a baseline number of swim lessons that we're putting in. And then as staffing allows, we add additional swim lessons for each session. And so it shows us what our baseline was last summer, what the reality was last summer, and what we're starting with baseline here. And we'll be able to continue to show what is growing as we're going. So we're working on some ability to better project what that capacity looks like. It is hard to say that 500 individual staff equals X number of swim lessons because the staff are lifeguards or swim instructors. They're seasonal staff. They might work 10 hours a week. They might work 15 hours a week. They might work 30. They might work 2. So it's really about the amount of space in the pool that is programmed as a swim lesson than the specific number of individuals for a projection.
Thank you, Jamie. And I really appreciated your comment about the fact that it is not just about staffing, that it is about assets as well, because we've had conversations in this group about the fact that, we have fewer pools fewer public pools in Portland than we did 10 years ago with more people. So with the closing of MLC, Buckman, and now Columbia. So we do have a couple questions, Adam, Sabrina, and Corbin. And we are nearly at time.
Mine is a very long-winded question that I don't mind bringing to them after the session. So Sabrina, if you have a shorter one, feel free to jump over me.
Thanks,
Adam.
Adam.
Short, but maybe shorter than long. I appreciated you all sharing how you pivoted with the early registration, kind of based on what you were seeing, and this is a lot of good data, and I'm wondering, how are you all beginning to pivot, like when you're seeing all this data? For example, when I look at community center and just the open spaces and even like the wait list, I'm wondering, are you seeing, okay, people are registering for these classes and not these ones, so does that mean we automatically close them? These ones have more wait lists. Like, I'm wondering kind of, what does all this data mean to you as like practitioners doing the work?
Yeah, so I have worked in Parks now for 18 years, and I started teaching the youth volunteer program in the summer. I've worked in all of the different positions in the community centers, and about an 80% fill rate is a good solid place to be for a program. So with centers being at 78% full for fall, that means they were in a pretty good spot, because you'll have some classes that aren't the ideal time and you'll have others that are packed. So that's actually kind of like our ideal target for filling. We also used to be very driven by revenue. And so the capacity fill rate was the most important things to us because it meant dollars. We are now trying to make a shift towards providing the services that are needed to people who need them most. And what happens when you have an access pass and when you are living with no income and you are, your life flexes maybe more than the folks that we used to advertise to that could pay 6 months in advance and pay full price. And so we're actually seeing less people actually showing up sometimes for classes. They sign up, for the cost that isn't, a barrier to them, but that cost is lower and their life might flex a little bit. So the actual attendance in the class is a little bit different than it used to be. And so that's something that we are experiencing, where there will be 8 people signed up, but only 6 are showing up. And so one of the things we're discussing is how to adjust that. We used to hold a 1-to-10 ratio very solidly, and we're considering maybe expanding that ratio if the pattern continues where more people register, but less of them are showing up. We're also doing a lot of adjusting with the goals and the principles and the levy goals that we're trying to achieve, and trying to balance, are we just trying to bring back the same registered activities we had before COVID, or are we looking to do different things? And are we looking to co-create and design programs with partners? Are we looking to provide access and space? And so some of the community center, the non-swimming lesson programs, we're seeing a slower build back because people are being more thoughtful about, are we just snapping back to exactly what we did before? Or are we really thinking through who is that designed for or with, and what should we be doing next with the available resources?
And I'll add, in reference to what Jamie mentioned, that we're designing classes and programs with partners. That also gives us opportunity to get feedback from partners because they have direct connection to those clients. So we're getting a different level of data that maybe not just be from a survey, but from that direct partner and partner of providing classes and so forth. So that's a new aspect that we're also getting and kind of morphing classes based on that feedback.
Thank you. Corbin has the last word.
So actually I have 2 asks, and this is probably me repeating myself. I think it's very important that we disaggregate the data when we're at these meetings. Referring to people, a whole set of people as non-white is something that we need to move away from, especially if we're going with an anti-racist framework for the city of Portland. I will also like to speak to, if we can get these reports written down so we can absorb this information and be ready to discuss it, because unfortunately we don't have time to really get into the weeds of this in particular. So I would just ask that moving forward, can we have a written document with asks that you want, or discussion points that you would like the board to discuss, with the understanding that we can keep the presentations down to 15 minutes, because a lot of this information is almost like water through a hose, and it's a lot of good information. And I think we're missing these opportunities to really highlight what staff is doing and really get to the discussion in which the board would like to do, because we're also supposed to be a forum for public discourse and discussion on these matters. So that's just an ask. I think it was a wonderful report, and I thank you for all the dedicated work that you're doing to move Parks and Recreation forward and really think about the vulnerable communities.
Corbin, thank you for that. We will continue to try to remember to disaggregate the data. And we did send the quarterly report in advance, but I will contend that Michelle was out, and so it fell to me, which means you got it late, and I apologize for that. And the quarterly report was really, really long anyway, so we'll do better. And the recreation quarterly report is sort of a new document that they've sort of resurrected. So moving forward, we'll make sure to share that in advance. And I think Jamie pulled up a slide that shows some demographics that may speak to some of your questions. And this is on Smartsheet, and this is their dashboard that they maintain for their work.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the dashboard here shows the demographics for all of the applications that have come in for the dry side summer recruitments. We're still working to incorporate aquatics into here. So 16% of those applicants are Black or African American, 8% Asian, 9% 2 or more races, 16% Latino, and 1% Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander.
By chance, if I can quickly ask you this question, do you know if any of these any of these folks within this demographic also speaks a second language? because also being able to communicate with the diversity of languages that we have in Portland is also important.
We highly, we gave a lot of highlight to that in the application, in the recruitments themselves. Also mentioning that there's the language pay incentive that is available after the time of hire, and are doing extra training for our supervisors so that they know how to work through that process for summer seasonals. So I cannot tell you how many of them will go through that process, but I know we're gearing up and expecting quite a few of the seasonal staff hired this summer to be fluent in additional languages and be able to apply for that incentive pay.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you for the report. Really appreciate it. Any last comments before we adjourn?
I owe Victor and.
I know. Victor and the
Victor is going to drinks at some point. Sorry.
Thank you, staff. Thank you, board.
Thank you very much, Recreation.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thumbs up.
I, of course.
When I was.